He makes me feel like a girl again. For the first time in 20 years, I don't feel invisible. I feel seen. I feel desired. Why can't my children just be happy for me? I want you to listen to those words very carefully. I want you to feel the texture of them. They were spoken to me by a woman I will call Eleanor. Eleanor was 64 years old. She was a retired university administrator, a woman of sharp intellect, impeccable taste, and a lifetime of achievements. She had raised 3 successful children, paid off a beautiful home, and curated a life of independence and dignity. And yet, when she sat on the couch in my practice, she was a shadow of that woman. She was trembling, she was defensive, and she was on the verge of losing her entire life savings, her relationship with her children, and her own self-respect to a man she had known for exactly 4 months. Eleanor's story is not unique. In fact, it is becoming a silent epidemic. We live in a culture that tells us love is ageless, that it is never too late for a fairy tale, and that love conquers all. And while love is indeed a beautiful, vital part of the human experience at any age, there is a very dark, unspoken underbelly to dating and relationships for women over 50 and 60. There is a specific psychology at play here, a collision of vulnerability, biological longing, and predatory behavior that we are simply not talking about enough. The reality is that late-life love is not the same as young love. The stakes are entirely different. When you are 20, a bad relationship costs you a few months of crying and maybe a shared apartment deposit. When you are 60, a bad relationship can cost you your retirement, your home, your health, your autonomy, and your legacy. I am speaking to you today as a clinical psychologist who has spent years specializing in the intricate, often hidden dynamics of female psychology and relationships. In my clinical practice, I have seen brilliant, capable women who have run companies, women who have raised families, women who have navigated divorces and deaths with grace suddenly fall apart because they stumbled into one of the hidden traps of late-life love. These traps are designed to bypass your logic. They target your deepest emotional voids. They weaponize your loneliness and your desire to care for others. This is not a video to tell you to give up on love, not at all. It is a video to give you the armor you need to survive it. We are going to walk through the 4 specific, hidden traps that ensnare women who are done settling but end up settling for something far more dangerous than they realize. These are the patterns that look like romance but act like parasites. Before we descend into these 4 traps, I need to ask you to do something for yourself and for the other women who need this information. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps the algorithm get this protective information to the women who are currently sitting in silence, wondering if they are going crazy. And I want you to make a commitment to stay with me until the very end of this discussion. At the end, I am going to give you a set of self-diagnostic questions, a litmus test that will instantly reveal if the relationship you are in, or the one you are considering, is safe, or if you are already standing in the jaws of a trap. These questions can save you years of heartache, so please, do not click away. The first hidden trap is something I call the sunset scarcity, or the panic of the closing window. This is the psychological bedrock upon which all other bad decisions are made. When we are young, we have what psychologists call an abundance mindset regarding time. We feel we have decades to fix mistakes. But as a woman enters her 50s and 60s, particularly if she has been alone for a long time or has recently emerged from a long, loveless marriage or widowhood, the perception of time shifts dramatically. The silence in the house becomes louder, the weekends feel longer, and there is a creeping, terrifying thought that whispers, "This is it. This is my last chance. If I don't make this work, I will die alone. This scarcity mindset creates a biological distortion. It lowers the bar for acceptable behavior because the alternative of absolute solitude feels like a death sentence to the primitive brain. I recall a client. Let's call her Linda. Linda was 58. She met a man named Gary. Gary was ... fine. He was adequately groomed. He had a job, and he showed up. But he was also critical. He made small, cutting remarks about Linda's weight. He was often late without apology. He dominated conversations. In her 30s, Linda would have laughed in his face and walked away. But at 58, Linda's brain was filtering these red flags through the lens of sunset scarcity. She told me, I know he's not perfect, but the thought of going back on the dating apps, the thought of another Christmas morning by myself, ... I just can't do it. This is the trap. The trap is believing that a painful presence is better than a peaceful absence. The danger here is that predators and opportunistic men can smell this fear. They know that if they just show up, you will do the rest of the work. You will overfunction to keep them because you are terrified of the void. The psychological consequence of the sunset scarcity trap is a progressive erosion of boundaries. You start compromising on small things he doesn't like, your friends, so you see them less. He doesn't like your cooking, so you change your diet. He doesn't want to travel, so you stay home. Step by step, you shrink your life to fit into the small space he allows. All because you are gripping this relationship like a life raft. But a life raft that leaks is not a rescue. It is just a slower way to drown. We have to be brutally honest about what this does to a woman's soul. It teaches you that your comfort doesn't matter. It reinforces the idea that you are lucky to be chosen, rather than him being lucky to have found you. And the longer you stay in this trap, the harder it is to leave, because the sunk cost fallacy kicks in. You think, I've invested 2 years, I'm 60 now, who else will want me? Here is the concrete rule for this first trap. You must never, under any circumstances, let the fear of an empty house dictate who is allowed to walk through the front door. Peace is always better than anxiety disguised as companionship. Now, we move to the second hidden trap. And this is perhaps the most pervasive one I see in women over 60. I call it the nurse with a purse syndrome. This sounds harsh, I know, but we need to use sharp language to cut through the denial. Women of this generation were socialized to be nurturers. You were raised to be wives, mothers, caretakers. You find value and purpose in helping. You are competent. You know how to run a household, manage appointments, and fix problems. Enter the older man in the dating market. Many men in this age bracket are looking for something very specific. They are not looking for a soulmate. They are looking for a hospice nurse, a housekeeper, and a banker, all rolled into one. They are looking for a soft place to land as their own health and finances decline. This is the trap where your competence becomes your curse. Let me tell you about Caroline. Caroline was 65, a retired nurse, ironically enough. She had a robust pension and a paid-off condo. She met Robert, who was 70. Robert was charming, a rugged individualist, as he called himself. But within 2 months, the narrative began to shift. Robert had bad luck with his investments. Robert had a complicated relationship with his children, who didn't talk to him anymore. Robert had chronic back pain that made it hard for him to keep his apartment clean. Caroline, with her heart of gold and her training as a healer, stepped right in. She didn't see a leech. She saw a fixer-upper. She saw a man in pain who needed a good woman to set him straight. She started buying the groceries. Then she started driving him to his appointments. Then she paid for his car repairs because he was short this month. Then he moved in because it just makes sense to consolidate expenses. Within 6 months, Caroline was no longer a girlfriend. She was a full-time, unpaid caregiver and financial sponsor for a man who offered her almost no emotional intimacy in return. The psychology here is driven by pathological altruism. It feels good to be needed. When he relies on you, you feel secure. You think, he can't leave me, he needs me. It creates a false sense of security. But this is not love. This is a transaction, and it is a parasitic one. The danger is that these men often have significant health issues or financial ruin that they have hidden, and they are essentially looking for a retirement plan in the form of a woman. The consequences are devastating. I have seen women burn through their life savings trying to prop up a partner's failing business or pay off his debts. I have seen women ruin their own physical health, lifting and caring for a man who refuses to take care of himself. And when the money runs out, or when the woman herself gets sick and needs care, often the man leaves. Because he wasn't there for the partnership, he was there for the service. Here is the concrete rule for the nurse with a purse trap. Financial autonomy and health management must remain completely separate until deep trust is proven over years, not months. You are looking for a partner, not a patient, and you must never combine finances with someone who has not shown you their full financial history and health plan. The third hidden trap is subtle and seductive. It is called the mirror of youth, or the trap of narcissistic supply. As we age, many women grapple with the feeling of invisibility. Society stops looking at us. We feel that our sensuality, our vibrancy, is fading in the eyes of the world. This creates a deep hunger to be seen as a sexual, vibrant being again. Predatory personalities, specifically narcissists, are experts at exploiting this hunger. This trap often involves love bombing, but with a specific twist for the older woman. The predator doesn't just tell you you're beautiful. He tells you that you are different from other women your age. He tells you that you have an energy, a spark, a youthfulness that is intoxicating. He holds up a mirror that shows you the version of yourself you desperately want to believe still exists. I worked with a woman named Julia, a widow of 3 years. She was wealthy, lonely, and deeply insecure about her aging body. She met a man who was 5 years younger, not a huge gap, but enough to flatter. He didn't just date her, he studied her. He mimicked her interests. He listened to her stories with an intensity that felt like he told her, "I've never met a woman with your fire." He made her feel like a teenager. But this intensity was a performance. It was a calculated rush to lower her defenses. Because he made her feel young, she ignored the fact that he had no long-term friends. She ignored the fact that he was secretive about his phone. She ignored the rage that flashed in his eyes when she said no to a small request. The trap here is falling in love with the reflection of yourself that he is projecting, not the man himself. You are addicted to the way he makes you feel about you. The psychological mechanism is dopamine dysregulation. The highs of this validation are so potent that they override the logic centers of the brain. You become addicted to the validation. And when he starts to withdraw it, which he inevitably will do anything to get it back. You will apologize for things you didn't do. You will hand over keys to your house. You will isolate yourself. The consequence of this trap is often a total shattering of self-worth when the mask falls. When the narcissist has secured what he wants, access to your home, your status, or your money, the flattery stops, and the devaluation begins. He will start to make you feel old. He will compare you to younger women. He will use your deepest insecurities, the ones you shared with him in those late-night talks, as weapons against you. Here is the concrete rule for the mirror of youth trap. If the romance feels like a Hollywood movie script in the first month, if the intensity is overwhelming and he claims you are soulmates before he knows your middle name, it is a performance, not a relationship. Slow it down and watch how he reacts to a boundary. And now, we arrive at the fourth hidden trap. This one is perhaps the most painful, because it involves the people you love most in the world. I call this the silo effect, or the isolation trap. In healthy late-life relationships, the goal is integration. You have a life, he has a life, and you weave them together. But in toxic late-life relationships, the partner demands that you choose. He creates an us against the world dynamic. This trap specifically targets your adult children, your grandchildren, or your oldest friends. The narrative starts slowly. He might say, "Your daughter treats you like a servant. I don't like how she talks to you. She's just jealous that you're happy." Or he might say, "Your friends are just bitter widows. They don't want you to be in love because they're miserable." He frames his isolation tactics as protection. He claims he is the only one who truly appreciates you, and everyone else is using you. Let's look at the case of Diane. Diane was 72. She had a close-knit family, Sunday dinners every week. She met a man who seemed wonderful at first. But soon, he started complaining about the Sunday dinners. "It's too loud," he'd say. "I just want to be with you." Then he started criticizing her son. "He only calls you when he wants money." Slowly, Diane started canceling the dinners. She stopped answering her son's calls as often, so she wouldn't have to deal with her partner's moody reaction. Within a year, Diane was estranged from her family. She was sitting in a silent house with a man who controlled her schedule, her phone, and her emotional access. The psychology here is triangulation. The predator drives a wedge between the victim and her support system. Because an isolated victim is easier to control. If you have no one to reality check his behavior, he can convince you that his abuse is normal. The consequences here are heartbreaking. I have seen women die alone, with their children afraid to visit because the boyfriend is hostile. I have seen grandmothers miss out on the early years of their grandchildren's lives because they were busy soothing the ego of a jealous man. This is a theft of your legacy. Here is the concrete rule for the silo effect trap. A healthy partner will never ever ask you to choose between him and the people who have loved you for decades. If he feels threatened by your children or friends, that is his insecurity to manage, not your relationship to sacrifice. Now, I want to zoom out for a moment. We have talked about the four traps: the sunset scarcity, the nurse with a purse, the mirror of youth, and the silo effect. But why does this matter so much? Why am I urging you to take this so seriously? Because the risks go beyond just a bad breakup. When you are in your 60s or 70s, your body reacts to stress differently than it did when you were 30. Walking on eggshells around a volatile or demanding partner keeps your cortisol levels chronically high. This destroys your immune system. It causes insomnia. It spikes your blood pressure. I cannot tell you how many women I have seen develop autoimmune flare-ups, heart conditions, or severe anxiety disorders purely because they are living in a state of low-grade terror in their own homes. Furthermore, we must talk about the emotional legacy. You have spent a lifetime building your identity. You have weathered storms. You have built a reputation. Do you want the final chapter of your life to be defined by a man who diminished you? Do you want your children to remember you as the woman who disappeared into a toxic relationship? Your autonomy is your most precious asset. It is the gold you have mined from decades of life experience. Do not hand it over to a prospector who just walked into town. So, what is the alternative? If we reject these traps, does it mean we must resign ourselves to solitude? Absolutely not. But we must embrace a different model of late-life love. We must look for companionate love rather than rescue love. There is a growing movement called Living Apart Together Lot. This is a model where you have a committed, loving, monogamous partner, but you maintain your own residences. You keep your own finances. You have your own sleep schedules. You come together for dates, for travel, for intimacy, but you do not merge your infrastructures. This model is incredibly protective for older women. It prevents the nurse with a purse dynamic because he is responsible for his own household. It prevents the silo effect because you have your own space to host your family. It allows for romance without the drudgery of domestic servitude. A healthy late-life relationship looks like two tall trees growing side by side. Their branches may touch and entangle. They may shelter each other from the wind, but their roots remain separate. They do not lean on each other so heavily that if one falls, the other is uprooted. I want to speak directly to your self-worth for a moment. You need to understand that at this stage in your life, you are the prize. You are the one with the emotional intelligence, the stability, the depth. You are not a leftover trying to be chosen. You are the selector. You have a life built of steel and velvet. You have survived things that would break weaker people. Do not trade that strength for a paper prince. Now, as I promised at the beginning, I want to give you a diagnostic test. I want you to close your eyes for a moment, if it is safe to do so, and ask yourself these questions honestly. Listen to the answer that comes from your gut, not your head. Question 1. Since meeting him, has my world become larger, or has it become smaller? Do I see more people, or fewer? Question 2. Do I feel calm when I hear his key in the door, or do I feel a tiny spike of anxiety, wondering what mood he is in? Question 3. Am I keeping secrets from my children or my best friends about his behavior or his finances, because I know they wouldn't approve? Question 4. Is the relationship balanced? If I stopped organizing, paying, and driving today, would he step up, or would the relationship collapse? Question 5. Do I feel like I have to perform youth or happiness to keep him interested? Can I be tired, sick, or sad around him and still feel loved? If you answered smaller, anxious yes to secrets, it would collapse, or I have to perform, you are likely in one of the traps we discussed. Please, listen to that signal. That is your intuition. It is the accumulated wisdom of your ancestors and your own life experience screaming at you to pay attention. The goal of this video is not to make you cynical. It is to make you sovereign. Wisdom is your shield. Boundaries are your gates. Love is welcome, but it must knock respectfully, and it must bring its own provisions. You have settled enough in your life. You have compromised enough. Do not spend your twilight years in the shadow of someone else's needs. Step into the light of your own worth. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this message resonated with you, if you saw a piece of your own story or a friend's story in these words, please share this video. Send it to your sisters, your daughters, your friends. Let's start a conversation about conscious, safe, and dignified love for women who have earned the right to be choosy. And don't forget to subscribe, because we have much more to discuss about navigating this chapter of life with power and grace.